The focus of our final section is the challenge of onboarding clients. Now, Karen, you're in Canada, based in Toronto, but I know you also have an office in Vancouver where you deal with many Chinese business people, some of them politically connected, trying to distance themselves from a restrictive regime back home. What kind of safeguards are in place to ensure due diligence of these applicants where there is potentially a higher risk of potential difficulties?
Well, Yuri, any risk is viewed in context. It has to be, and any red flag for that matter has to be viewed in context. So whether we're talking about political exposure or jurisdictional risk, you mentioned China. Yes, China happens to be a high-risk jurisdiction. Many of the jurisdictions that attract individuals looking for these passport and citizenship opportunities are in fact the high-risk jurisdictions of the world. So it's not just China, but whenever you're looking at those high-risk factors or red flags, it has to be viewed in context of what the program itself, the Citizenship by Investment program, has as their risk appetite, their risk threshold. So really, the due diligence provider is not there to make a decision, is not there to say this person should be approved, should not be approved. We're there to provide the facts and the information, arm the programs with the information they need to say, okay, this person is above or below the risk threshold we have for acceptance. And that they're also going to be taking into account the information they get from other sources, such as intelligence and law enforcement agencies. So altogether, they have to review that in light of their own risk appetite. So there's no real guarantee. It's a risk-based approach applied according to whatever framework the program has in place.
So if I can bring in Eddy on this topic, in your experience, Eddy, is it necessary to conduct a deeper, enhanced due diligence process from some applicants and perhaps a lighter version for others in a kind of a two-track approach?
We carry out the same levels of investigations and checks for all the applicants and dependents, based on the criteria that have been given to us by the client country, based on the paperwork and the documentation that we've been given. So we don't discriminate, because we don't know. When we get an application in, we don't know if they're going to be high risk or low risk, or even if they are wealthy, even if they declare they're wealthy, or if they're relatively poor but have just managed to scrape together enough money to be able to make one of these applications. So we apply the same verification process, the same due diligence to all the applicants, and we provide a risk profile, as Karen said, to the client to enable them to make that ultimate decision.
Now, if I can bring in Heyrick on the same topic, what we've seen occasionally in the Caribbean is certain individuals being flagged by the pan-regional anti-crime bodies as being questionable. Yet the nations sometimes ignore these regional concerns because they badly need the money to help alleviate the damage from hurricanes perhaps, or other natural disasters. What do we do in these circumstances?
Well, whilst acknowledging the fact that there'll be tremendous pressure on them if it is, for example, a post-hurricane scenario, or even the fact that there's been a complete dearth of tourism over the pandemic, and that's put increasing pressure on the units and the funds that come into the jurisdictions. I think what we've seen, certainly over the last few years, that they're taking a much longer view in terms of the integrity of their programs, and they've realized how vital they are to all of them, actually, to all of the, if we look at the Caribbean as an example, to all of them in the region, that the integrity of each of the individual programs is maintained in order to give that kind of wrapper of integrity around all of them. And so, to answer your question, they are taking a much longer view. There's no point in having a quick win if it's going to blow up in your face, and actually it could result in the banks not wanting to do business with you, which means the program falls over straight away. And so, I think where they've possibly made mistakes and some of the things you've alluded to in the past, they're acutely aware of the scrutiny that they're under at the moment, and therefore, we haven't seen that sort of thing happening more recently.
Now, we've seen two major game-changing events in the last 3 years, Heyrick, both with global consequences. The COVID pandemic and now the brutal Russian invasion of Ukraine. How have these affected the CBI industry and the due diligence which enables its functioning?
So I think how they've affected the countries and their GDP is around, there's been this huge reliance on tourism, and that, when we think about the pandemic, has really dropped away over the past couple of years. It's come back now to a greater degree, but that's put a lot more pressure onto the units, who have become actually much more focused on their process and how they run themselves to become as efficient as possible, so that they can ensure that they're making the most of the opportunities in terms of the applicants that are presenting themselves to them. But within that, as we've alluded to, there hasn't been a compromise on the due diligence. They understand how important a part it is in that process, in order to be able to quite rightly hold their hands up and say, look, we've got external parties auditing all of our applicants at least twice, usually 3 or 4 times when you bring into play the security agencies, and also actually the things like the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, and the piece, the project that St. Lucia have been really pushing around, the Citizenship by Investment Program Association, which slightly faltered over COVID, but is now back on track. We're seeing those sorts of things being put in play to ensure that there is no compromise on this front.
Many thanks, Karen Kelly from Exiger, Eddy Leviton of Fact Worldwide, and Heyrick Bond Gunning of SRM, particularly for that excellent summary of the programs at the end. We look forward to further discussions with all of you about migration and due diligence. And many thanks to all our viewers in the PWM family.